In part two of this video, we will look at the events of the war, especially the contribution of Black Americans. As President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln was legally the Commander-in-Chief of the Union Army. The Confederate States elected their own president, Jefferson Davis, representing the states that were in armed rebellion against the U.S. The Confederacy's first move was to take control of government property, especially military bases located throughout the southern states. One of these was Fort Sumter, an island stronghold off the coast of South Carolina. President Lincoln attempted to send reinforcements by sea, but the Confederate Army opened fire, and after 34 hours of artillery fire, the soldiers defending Fort Sumter surrendered. The Confederacy had won the first engagement of the war. As Union and Confederacy clashed, there was an immediate reaction from the enslaved population. Thousands of blacks escaped and sought refuge in Union Army camps, offering to help in any way they could. These refugees were called contrabands, a word meaning something it is illegal to have. And indeed, the Army's initial response was to reject these would-be allies. Eventually, the contrabands were accepted by the Union Army, but only in support roles, and were not trained for combat. Some in the North had expected a quick victory, but war raged on, and it became clear that the Confederacy would not be easily defeated. As the possibility emerged that the Union might actually lose the fight, it began to change its attitude on the use of Black personnel, organizing all-Black support units by the summer of 1862, just over a year into the war. But the big shift occurred early in 1863, when the Union Army finally began training Black soldiers for combat. The first Black combat regiment was the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, formed in February of that year. As the undisputed leader of Black Americans, both enslaved and free, Frederick Douglass encouraged his people to join the fight and do whatever they could to support the Union war effort. After February 1863, Black Americans were able to fight, albeit in segregated units commanded by white officers. But the Civil War produced Black heroes on and off the battlefield, and some of those achievements should be acknowledged here. One of the most heroic exploits of the war was the story of Robert Smalls, who managed to take control of a Confederate steamship in May of 1862, after the white officers had disembarked to spend the night on shore. Smalls freed his crew and their families before sailing to Union-controlled waters and turning over the ship to the Union Navy. His courage helped convince President Lincoln to accept Black soldiers into the Union Army. After the war, Smalls became a politician, representing South Carolina in the U.S. House of Representatives. Black women also played an important role in the Civil War, albeit not in combat roles. One major need was for nurses to treat wounded soldiers in Union Army field hospitals. One woman who contributed as a nurse was Susie King Taylor, who after the war volunteered her services as a school teacher for newly freed Black children as well. Another field nurse was Sojourner Truth, one of the most famous abolitionists in American history. Sojourner was known for her passionate public speaking and hard-nosed toughness, but also volunteered to treat wounded soldiers during the war. Finally, two Black women distinguished themselves as spies during the Civil War. The first, Harriet Tubman, should be no surprise, given her reputation for courage and her 19 trips to the South as a conductor of the Underground Railroad. She had a talent for infiltrating the South and escaping with her life, which made her an excellent spy. An equally impressive, if less famous example is the case of Mary Bowser, who collected high-level sensitive information about the Confederacy while posing as a household servant in the home of none other than Confederate President Jefferson Davis. These stories, and many others, demonstrate the courage of African Americans and their dedication to fighting for the betterment of their people. And as we will see in the next section, their participation was undoubtedly a factor in the eventual Union victory over the Confederacy.